Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Masri and Kira Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the CRM Success Show, where we deep dive into CRM success and failure, delivering real stories with real impact. I'm Dave Masri.
And I'm Kira Whitey.
And today we're talking with Stefan Ludlow, the CTO of Cerity Partners. So welcome, Stefan.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Great.
Doing good. Great to have you on the show. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
So, Stefan, we're going to start off real simple. Could you tell us a little bit about you, your background, and the current company that you're supporting, Cerity Partners?
Yeah, Stefan Ludlow. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Cerity Partners. We're a fairly large wealth management shop. We provide financial planning, investment management to high net worth individuals, their families. We work with companies across the nation as well to provide 401k plan management services, workplace services, and a wide variety of other services in the financial space. We're roughly 1,000 people, just a bit over, spread across the United States. So we've got offices in LA, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Louisville, all over. I've had the opportunity to grow with Cerity Partners since we were a relatively small 100-person shop. And I've had the opportunity to see us grow from that 100 people to that 1,000, and we're going to continue on that journey. From what do I do on a day-to-day basis? I focus on CRM, of course, which is why we're here today, data engineering, and cybersecurity and infrastructure as well on the classic IT side. So kind of dual hat in both of those domains. I get to work on everything from the laptops that every single colleague of ours has, to the CRM that all of our colleagues use, to the 10 million rows of data that we process every single day across 26 different data sources and process into data lakes and data warehouses and then pull down into those systems again. So it's quite a diverse role. We've got about 4 teams supporting those different initiatives underneath technology. And it's a tremendous amount of fun. It's frankly a privilege to work across that breadth of technology. As far as background, before this, I was at a wonderful company called Dynasty Financial Partners out of New York, supporting about 45 different RIAs across the nation, doing CRM implementations. And before that, before I made the journey over to New York, I was in Indiana, where I started off doing bond, loan, and grant administration tracking, the most fascinating topic in the universe. And working in the insurance space. So always been in technology in my career, and I've had the privilege of working across systems and platforms, particularly in the CRM space. That was frankly my first love in technology. That's how I got into the corporate side doing Salesforce implementations. And then that's always been with me through my career.
That's fantastic. Now, I noticed that earlier you mentioned most underappreciated role was the business analyst. I happen to see that's where you started out your career as a business analyst. So any bias there, Stefan?
Definitely some bias. I never say there isn't. It is where I started and where I cut my teeth. I had a family friend once when I was very just getting out of school. He came up to me and he was like, "Hey, you know this tech stuff, right? You know this programming, what these APIs are." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." I was a history major originally, but graduated from Butler University. But I loved to dabble in technology, so of course I said yes. So the kind of entry role was a business analyst, working with users, asking questions about, hey, what are your processes? What are your data flows? Like who's clicking what button, entering what data where, and what is the impact to that have on upstream systems? You get exposure to so many different parts of the business as a business analyst. One day you're working on some AR process. Another day you're working on a form on a website that's taking in data. And then another day you're working on a SQL database, writing bad SQL queries and locking the entire database for the entire company on multiple occasions. So definitely a bias, but I think it's such an essential role. And now that I've got a team of developers, it's a role that I look at as so absolutely essential, something that we don't have enough of, I would say, and no organization has enough of analyzing how business actually operates and how can you use technology to get in there and update it and upgrade it and make it move more smoothly, move faster, all that good stuff.
I would agree. I think it's often where I hear projects fail is the requirement gathering piece at the beginning of the project wasn't done effectively, right? Or it wasn't done with the right people that are going to be the daily users of the platform. But that makes sense. A couple of questions before we dive into the nitty gritty, just for context for our listeners, that we had previously spoken about. Just to give it an idea, high net worth, could you define that amount for our listeners? What constitutes a high net worth?
As we think about high net worth, that's really looking at someone, I would say, with over 5 million in assets. There's obviously ultra high net worth, there's mass affluent below that. So, I mean, if you ask 3 different people, you will get a couple different definitions. But really, when you're looking at someone with more complexity than just $1 million in a 401k, but it probably shifts into that ultra high net worth category as you go 10, 15, 20, 25 million in investable assets. But that $5 million to $10 million sweet spot, that really is where a lot of folks have complexity with their investments, where they need someone to give them a hand in understanding that complexity, understanding the different options that they have, and where they can get a hand in that. And that's where Cerity Partners comes in.
Perfect. Now, I know one of the areas we'll focus on today as the conversation continues is around merger environments. So before I hand over to Maz, do you want to tell our listeners just how many mergers you've done in your near 6 years as CTO of the business? Absolutely.
So over the last 6 years, we've done over 35 mergers. So we've grown largely through what is called mergers and acquisitions, really that focus on merging 2 companies together that are doing something relatively similar. And that's really when I came into Cerity Partners. My first meeting was an introduction to one of those teams that were coming on board and doing discovery. Kind of what I started my career doing was the first entry point into this company, of looking at what are the tools, technology, processes that a team up in Chicago, as it happened, was leveraging, and what was the migration path, what was the integration path, how would we work together effectively on a unified client base. That was where I first started cutting my teeth, and it really hasn't stopped. As we look at Cerity Partners, that's really become a core competency from a technology perspective, where we've actually built some dedicated teams within our technology practice to align in and be able to execute that, while frankly not kind of breaking the way that the business runs. For every merger that we do, if I did a merger 6 years ago or 5 years ago, 4 years ago, those colleagues on board and then expect and want a growing and changing platform that's adjusting to their particular business needs. And we need to keep delivering on that, while also making sure that new colleagues who are joining have a smooth and effective onboarding, and don't go through too much disruption as they go through it. That's always the goal, not to disrupt the business as it goes through that process, while also aligning into a common way of doing things.
Awesome. So to be clear, when you say there were 35 mergers, you're not just talking about organization mergers, you're also talking about system mergers.
Every single one. As we look at a typical merger, it goes through a couple different phases, and my team deals with 2 major ones. One is obviously the IT infrastructure onboarding. That's just, how are you sending an email to your clients? What email domain are you using for that? How can we, as quickly as reasonably possible, again, without disrupting the business, have someone operating as Cerity Partners quickly, effectively, with a minimal amount of disruption? That's everything from here's your new laptop to here's how email works to bridging data from one system into another. So a typical IT conversion can alone have a dozen tools that a team is using, everything from Outlook to scheduling software to chat and what have you. And then, of course, there's the CRM conversion, which is often one of the most difficult and challenging. And there's others that come down the line depending on what tools the team is presently using, from how do we report on assets, how do we do presentations, all that good stuff. But my focus is really on that CRM and the IT side. So it's a process, and it's one that we've built a core expertise in. It's something that we do over and over and over again, and have developed a playbook. Of course, the best laid plans, when they go into practice, they go into the wind, but we do a fairly good job of doing that process in a repeatable fashion, while understanding that every team that's coming in to Cerity Partners, while what we do is very, very similar oftentimes, particularly in the wealth management side. We're all managing clients' assets. We're all doing financial planning. We're all working with one of our custodial partners in executing paperwork. We're all doing money movement. The client needs to move money from location A to location B. And it's understanding, okay, teams, how are you doing that? How are you using your CRM to do that? That's been one of the interesting things really since the start of my career in wealth management specifically. What is a CRM to a wealth management firm? It's very rarely a sales tool that has that role. It's very often an operational hub that's being used to manage the life cycle of a particular client. And that becomes an incredibly delicate part of doing a transition, doing a merger. How do you make sure that a team that's on a day-to-day basis using a CRM to schedule every one of their client meetings? That's kind of one of the core heartbeats of wealth management. How do you make sure that when they go from system A to system B, that they're still able to do that, even though how they're going to do that, like what button are they going to click, that's probably going to change. But that they're going to do that activity, that's essential that we carry that business process forward.
Okay, awesome. So I want to take a step back, and you touched on this a bit. So can you just give us a bit of background? Because a lot of our listeners probably aren't that familiar with financial services and wealth management. So a little bit of what that means and how your users use Salesforce, what they use it for. I think you're on FSC. I don't remember.
Standard Salesforce Service Cloud. That's the technical version that we were on. We were on FSC way back in the day. That first meeting that I actually had, and this kind of represents, I think, a little bit of the Cerity Partners philosophy. Whereas we're doing mergers, if someone is doing something better than us, we'll look at that technology and we'll be like, how can we use this for the entire firm? This specifically happened in one of my very, very first mergers. We had an FSC instance. It was, I'm sure the person who implemented it will watch this, and so love them dearly. It was perhaps unoptimized. We'll be charitable on that. So we did this. We met with this team up in Chicago, and they'd created a really quite excellent CRM focused in what we call 401k plan management. It was where they had that team's primary driver, meaning they work with companies who have a 401k plan, and they provide services to that company to make sure that plan is well architected, well constructed, that the participants, the employees of that firm are able to leverage it. They also provided services to the employees of those companies from a planning perspective. How should they structure their 401k investments individually? They also had a wealth management division within that company. And as we started to do due diligence, as we got into their CRM, as we dived in, I was like, this is actually pretty good from an architecture perspective. At Dynasty Financial Partners, we had used a variety of different implementations of Salesforce, from Skyence to Practify to the early versions of FSC. We've done those implementations. So we got a broad ranging view. And I always ask myself, what if we just use vanilla Salesforce? Like, is our data model really so different from what core Salesforce does that it's unusable. So this instance happened across our lab, and we looked at it and we are just like, no, this is actually really good, particularly when you compare it to the data architecture of person accounts that we were presently kind of fighting with. Not to say it's not come a long way, but we took the opportunity to simplify our architecture with that decision and just use Salesforce out of the box. So that's what we did there.
So I'm sure a lot of people are asking, like, can you give us specifics? Like what was better?
If you look at when you're building data integrations between two systems, whether you've got a hub in the background, like a MuleSoft that's pushing data back and forth, or you're building kind of homegrown APIs that you're running up in a cloud environment like Azure or AWS with a job scheduler, being able to cleanly and quickly identify what data from what source system you're pulling to where in a very simple way is really, really important from a time to market perspective. So what we found with person accounts is that there was two main things that we struggled with. Number one was, hey, always know what you're getting from an API call perspective. Where is this data in the particular object? Is it on the account side? Is it on the contact side? You have to do kind of some way to get both together. Now it's largely been resolved in the years since on the Salesforce side. It's much easier now than it used to be. The other bit was the lack of kind of enforced data integrity between the concept of an account and a contact. For us, that became that was really, 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 I can't say it enough, important. That we could generate an accurate count of our clients, that we could generate an accurate picture of what is a client from a data structure perspective. And historically, and this goes back to my time at Dynasty from an architecture perspective, it was always a household. So when we're dealing with, you kind of asked this earlier, like how does wealth management work? Well, our clients are oftentimes families. It's John and Mary Smith, plus their LLC, plus maybe a foundation, plus a business that they have, plus a trust. It's really a collection of different entities that we're working with that you needed to create a hierarchy across. And John and Mary Smith are associated to the account, the household, so to speak. We found that data structure to be really, really important from how are we building automations? How are we building data integrations? How are we building reporting? And out of the box, the Salesforce account to contact structure, where I have essentially a company plus employees, in this case, a household plus family members, that data model was able to be really, really consistent out of the box Salesforce. With FSC, it really felt like it was designed more towards the banking or insurance sector, where an individual, John Smith, is your client, whereas in our universe, it's the family. So that kind of core difference, where FSC almost, I don't want to say it encourages, and you can build this referential integrity, and we have, on my side, historically, done that within an FSC environment where you create the lookup field on the person account to an account. That's the household, and you can kind of get there, and you can build some automations in the back end to enforce it, but it wasn't out of the box, and we felt like we were always fighting it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I get it because I'm very familiar with the FSC model. There's definitely complexity there, but I think a lot of it's done more so because they want to capture a very wide range of relationships, right?
Absolutely.
So
Agree.
they don't want you to roll up only to one group because the trust could have employees, let's say, or the business can have employees, and maybe they're also potentially customers. I don't know if that wants to roll up to the household. Maybe it rolls up to two different places. It also does lots of things like, I want to know who your accountant is, and that accountant rolls up to an accounting firm, and that firm works with 12 other households, and they have 6 accountants to them, and they're related for different people, and you know, I, Dave, or Maz use accountant A as part of, accounting firm B, and my son just can't stand that same person, so they use a different person in the same firm. And it's really, really complex when you get to this kind of personal relationships, and I think they really try to build out to allow all of that complexity. And the power, you lose the simplicity of just kind of the nature of technology. And I think that might be what you kind of ran into.
Exactly. We found a lot of value in creating a easily understandable and consistent data model. And it took a tremendous amount of time. One of the core things that we did very, very early on that helped us in that journey was we realized there wasn't a identifier that was friendly for the business to use. What we call Cerity partners. So we were very creative. Let's create a Cerity partners ID. And that lived at the household. And it allowed the business to have a vocabulary that was aligned with the data model that everyone, when we're talking about a particular relationship, we very easily, is when we talk to accounts in financial services, people are very confused. They're like, what do you mean, a financial account? A financial account's not a household. What are you talking about? Well, it's a Salesforce account. A lot of confusion there. So we ended up, we frankly end up using more often the short name for that identifier as shorthand for the relationship. And because they're one-to-one, we can then, as we're doing other systems that are adjacent to the CRM, such as a general ledger, such as a portfolio reporting system, which is a source of truth of financial account data for a relationship, as we're doing financial planning associated with that relationship. By having that ID, I mean, it seems so simple, right? A simple concept, but by having that vocabulary that the business is aligned on this relationship's ID is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, how do I link two systems together? Well, you put that ID on a financial account. You put that ID on a financial planning client, and we will pull that data together. And you're talking about the same thing in two different systems, which in financial services seems to be one of the deepest challenges, because the breadth of different types of data that we work with for a particular client, everything from tax returns to financial accounts to financial plans and what have you. So having that vocabulary and a simple data model allowed us to accelerate the adoption of the platform as kind of a source of truth of client data, as opposed to, oh yeah, there's just a CRM in the left-hand corner, click the button to onboard a client, but you don't really need to use it. Really became more entrenched in the business.
Right, awesome. So going back to something you said previously, that you really systematized all of these mergers. Now, clearly you have a very customized, because it's not even FSC, Salesforce, a very, I guess, well thought out plan data model, right? So now, and at the same time, you saying that you were able to systemize moving all of this data from all of the other firms that you're merging with, where their models might not have been as well thought out, let's say, or their data was messy or unclean or no households or.
That never happens, right? Everyone's data is super clean.
Yeah. So, but anyway, tell us how you did that, right?
Well, it differs between platforms. So as we looked at Dynamics conversions, Salesforce conversions, where you really have systems that are as complex as ours, those become much, much more bespoke, much more challenging, because someone could have a foundationally different data model for you. We found this once. We worked with a team, and as we started having conversations, it came out really quickly that they viewed client relationships really at that financial account level, like on a day-to-day basis. That's what they were talking about, and that's how they did their agreements. That's how they did their data relationships, and that was different than us. And if I said there was an easy translation layer on that, I would not be being truthful. It was difficult, and it was change management on both sides. And that's where we put our business analyst hat on in a very big way, and had to get in and understand, how does that team work? How does that team structure the data? Contrast that to when we encounter a red tail instance, though. We're fairly frequent out in the wealth management space. You'll find a red tail CRM. There's not a lot of flexibility in the data model for Redtail. You've got a household and contacts and financial accounts, and then it's all out of the box, and it's same from every single instance of Redtail, 1-to-1 to 1-to-1 to 1. There's a custom field area, so appended to the back end of the household data, you'll be like, okay, here's custom field 1, 2, 3, 4. A team could do all sorts of stuff with that, but it's fairly straightforward. You can write a script for the vast majority of Redtail CRM's conversion, and then use that script over and over and over and over again, as long as the team is generally using that system in the same way that we would expect, which we found with Redtail, it's actually fairly consistent. So we can do a Redtail conversion very, very quickly. Dynamics conversion, team of people get assigned, do a deep dive analysis of how that system is configured, how it works, and execute that conversion very, very carefully in collaboration with the business. So being able to flex into those two models from a data integration, data migration perspective has really been key. And as you look at our, if you look at our project planning tool, and you look at in particular one instance, we very quickly define, is this a team that maybe hasn't adopted CRM in a deep way, where we need to, hey, it's just an onboarding. Here's our CRM, use it. It's great. Water's warm, fantastic. Are they on something like Redtail, where it's a simple integration where you run a script? And we've seen that platform before, and there's 6 or 7 of those in the wealth management space that are fairly, here's a box, that system is shaped like that box, and you can rinse and repeat with variation. Or is it a highly complex system like another Salesforce, like another Dynamics? So being able to not paint by numbers on every single one, but to have a plan, 3 plans essentially, that we can leverage depending on the situation, that's really been important for our success. The change management component on the user side, though, on the colleague side, being the most important part of any of those migrations, even if a data migration is simple, working with the colleagues and onboarding them into your platform, that's always hard. It's change. And you need to give a warm bear hug to someone and be like, hey, it's okay. We're going to be with you every step of the way. Here's how you do that thing you did a month ago.
So it sounds like it was more standardizing the process than the code base.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Standardizing the process and building that competency within the team who's done this over and over and over again. When a team first meets us and asks, are you going to take care of me and my data, the most sensitive data that we work with? These are our client relationships. This is so important. You can't break this. If you break this, you break how we service our clients. It has to be a deeply empathetic conversation from the moment you meet them. It can never be we're going to run roughshod over you and this is just what you do. That's a way to destroy trust and make the whole process much more difficult. Whereas if you go in very empathetically and you've done the system that team is on a couple of times, and you clearly know what you're talking about when you're talking to the team, and be like, hey, we know with Juncture, one of the older platforms that we sometimes encounter, it's going away now from just being offered in the marketplace. But hey, we know that when we look at an activity record in Juncture, it's actually 3 records that have been smashed together, and you've got your pre-meeting, your post-meeting, your unstructured notes, and you need to go into that and kind of figure that out. That we can go in and be like, we're not going to be surprised by that. That's important.
Perfect. So Stefan, just again for context, I'll be honest, I've never heard of Redtail before, but whilst you were in your, doing your thing and in the zone, I had a quick look, and just for context for listeners, are we right in saying it's a cloud-based CRM for financial advisors? That's essentially what it is.
Absolutely. So as we look at, if we look in the broader marketplace on like the either sales tech, consumer tech, other non-financial services, someone will buy HubSpot CRM, they'll buy Salesforce. There's all sorts of different CRMs that you can buy Pipedrive. Same thing's true in financial services. Salesforce FSC has a tremendous market dominance in that space, and that's kind of the standard tool that someone in wealth management, if you call up Salesforce, they're going to sell you FSC. It's not a bad product. And particularly if you don't have a team of developers, you just need a CRM with out-of-the-box integrations. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. And Salesforce, so you can continue to customize it and build APIs. But on that same note, beyond that, there's of course standard Salesforce, and then there's a bunch of different resellers of Salesforce who build platforms on top of it. So you've got Practify, you've got Skyence, you've got half dozen others. XLR8 is one of them that have taken either platform licenses or Salesforce in full and have a managed package that lives on top of that. So there's quite a bit of diversity. There's also SaaS products that are completely unaffiliated with Salesforce. There's Salentica, which is on Microsoft Dynamics. They also have a version on top of Salesforce. You've got Wealthbox, a really super cool CRM, cloud native SaaS, API driven with a bunch of connectivity. They almost came into the space more than 6 years ago. They've been in space for a long time. Billed as, hey, we're their alternative to the stodgy old systems that you guys have been used to. And we've got the first Zapier connection, and you can just plug us into anything you want. Very cool guys over there building cool tools. But so in the M&A space in wealth management, we encounter quite a few different tools that are being used as CRMs. There's almost always a tool, but there is diversity in the space.
Why did you choose? One of the things we like to cover on the show is around selection and why you choose a certain system. So very briefly, could you tell us why you chose Redtail? Did you choose it, or it was pre your time?
We chose Salesforce, just to be clear.
Yeah.
We chose Salesforce. We find that a lot of people choose Redtail as their platform.
Got you.
Often they choose it from a cost perspective. If I'm a business looking for a CRM and I ask the question, hey, I need something that I know is going to work, that's not going to break the bank, and that has good data integrations with other common platforms. Your wealth boxes, your Redtails, your Salenticas, your FSC, all fit the bill.
Mm-hmm.
And you can make those selections. But the question really a team needs to ask, if you just want to check the box CRM and get it onboarded, that's not a bad way to do it. But oftentimes people want to extend their CRMs, to continue that journey of how can I make this a core part of my business and start to customize it, particularly when we talk about the average size of a wealth management team. Generally, what we find is 5 to 15 people is a very typical size of company in wealth management.
Okay.
John Smith Financial Advisors, Smith Financial, those sorts of companies, they're all over the place. And they're wonderful, wonderful small companies that are doing tremendous service for their clients, working with third-party providers to build a platform. And they often need to slot in a CRM. So they'll pick Salentica, or they'll pick or they'll pick FSC. But they won't generally customize them. What we found changing in the industry, though, quite a bit is as teams get bigger, like Cerity Partners, we went from 100 people to 1,000 over the course of 6 years. We needed to customize our technology very much to our own individual business processes. And that's where Salesforce really became one of our key tools, and that we had that ability to customize. And that's why people pick Salesforce, at least in my opinion. They want a platform that will work, number one, from fairly early in the implementation, but that can be extended almost as far as you can take it. They don't want to be limited by their platform. And Salesforce is that platform. I think they have a price to justify that, but no.
Perfect. Appreciate the clarity there. So a lot of businesses we see in 2024 and the last couple of years as well, in order to grow, scale, survive, they're merging, right? And doubling down, joining forces, becoming bigger and better. That's a big part of your business model. As we discussed earlier, 35 migrations, mergers in 5-6 years. How do you, I guess, assess from a technology standpoint the tech that you're merging together? Surely there's going to be cases where there's duplicate data, there's crossover between companies you merge with. Each business has different adoption levels than the other. So do you do like an audit and analysis, a spot check like we call it like an MOT in the UK, like a vehicle inspection type process when you merge with a new company?
Absolutely. One of the critical processes, and it's important for both sides, as a team is going through a merger, is they need to understand what our technology is and what our stack is, and we need to understand theirs. What have they built? What are the APIs moving data between platforms? Because again, what is the overarching goal when you're doing a merger? Our goal as Cerity partners is to provide the absolute best quality investment advice and financial planning for our clients and their families. We all want to be able to do that. So to ensure that there's no disruption in that during the merger process, we absolutely have to dive in and understand how, from a technology perspective, they're actually providing that service, so that we can map out when they're going through that migration, what's changing and how are we kind of catching that business process on the other side. Every single tool gets a migration plan. Literally every single tool. As we go through a merger diligence process, we get to, it's not just making sure that everything's running well, it's also looking ahead into the future. It's like, what is the path that this particular tool is going to take? So if someone's coming in with a Calendly instance, for instance, that's fairly common that someone will come in with that, a DocuSign instance, an Adobe instance. Really what we'll do is we'll map a migration path. Oftentimes at this point, Cerity partners will have that tool within its stack. So it's a question of, can we just join the two together, merge the contracts in a fairly straightforward way, or just add them? Can you do that? Or is it, do you shut down that tool, add them to ours, move a little data over, and just you're off to the races? Oftentimes it's somewhere in between. Every vendor has a little bit of a nuance, and that's one of the things that we found doing as many mergers historically as we have. It allows us to avoid disruption because we know the migration path of every single tool. So when we're talking about a financial planning tool, for example, we know how data can, if it can, move between the platform a current team is using and their future platform. And we know the nuances. It's like, hey, FYI, we'll be able to recreate all the data in our system, but this one piece will have to be manually done. It's all about expectation setting, right? If you can do that diligence process, provide a team deep clarity into what the migration path is, because Cerity Partners very much wants to be one firm. What we aren't doing is just bolting teams onto the side continuously. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What we're doing is really becoming one company. It goes back to that when we met with that team up in Chicago, that awesome CRM instance, that awesome Salesforce instance. And we wanted to bring the best of both into the firm on a go-forward basis. Like, that's our philosophy. So empathetic, collaborative, but you have to know. So yes, we do that deep diligence process on every single tool. Down to if someone spent a credit card on something that costs $15 a month, we're going to find it, ask the question, what is it used for? How is it used for? We often find that that's honestly where a lot of unexpected complexity can live, where someone's used a credit card to build an integration that they didn't have a big tech team behind them. They just needed to figure it out to service their clients. We find that pretty frequently. And we have to understand, okay, what have you done there, and how it's okay. We'll keep that running, or we'll keep a version of that business process running, but how do we bring that over? We have to figure that out each time.
What surprises you the most when you do these initial audit discoveries, health checks with new businesses that have merged into the brand, into Cerity Partners? What is the or the eyebrow, like, okay, I wasn't expecting that? And it might not be on every occasion, but just a trend that you've seen.
You know, what I found, and Maz, I don't know if you've seen the same thing here, is the level of sophistication of just companies today, even at a small size from a technology perspective, is materially different than it was 6+ years ago. We've had a number of instances where we'll meet with a team of colleagues and we'll have a data flow architecture diagram that's just like, someone will just go over in the corner, pull one out at the ready that's got great data flows between systems and an architecture diagram and what's the frequency. And I love that. That's so absolutely fantastic. 6 years ago, I didn't see that a whole lot. But now I think there's been a bit of a democratization of tools and tooling from a tech perspective that's allowed people to build more sophisticated data integrations between platforms. They're not always the most scalable, they're not always the most robust, but they get the job done, which is people's jobs at the end of the day. Businesses don't always, particularly when you just don't have a big depth of team, the focus is not always on how do I build the most scalable, robust infrastructure. If someone needs to kick it in the corner to make it run in the morning, that's okay. But they will build data integration. So that's what's somewhat surprised me, is the level of sophistication, even in small teams that don't have dedicated tech resources. If a team wants to build something interesting, there are tools and technology out there that they're going to be able to make some headway in.
To answer your question, it's not something I've thought about, but I think there's almost no correlation between team size and the sophistication of their tech stack. It's bizarre. Like you'd work with a Fortune 500 company and you would like, how are they operating like this? It can be, yeah, it can be some like really crazy sometimes. I don't know if it's just a ton of historical tech debt, or historical processes and ways of doing things, or bureaucracy. But there's I find very little correlation. One of the things I wanted to ask is about quality control, because it's something I face a lot. I'll have one team that's exactly like you said. This data is so important; it's got to be right, and they're going to test it and test it and test it. And then you'll have another team that won't even look at it until it's live, and almost will refuse to look at it until it's in the production environment. And again, I don't fully understand that attitude, but it's definitely there, and it comes up a lot. Is that something that you faced, where getting the user base to stop focusing on their job and focusing on making sure the transition is smooth?
I've honestly had to have our team take a moderate role in that. Now, we can never be a substitute for a team that knows their clients, that knows their data. Like, that's the golden source of quality control in a data migration. You have to have that. You have to have hands on keyboard looking at data and signing off on it. But yeah, as you say, there's a diversity of, do I have the time to do that? Do I have am I the right person? Do I have an understanding of the full client base? Maybe I understand a part of it and I've been assigned to the project. We've really had to take a activist role if we just migrate from scratch using the scripts and don't ourselves, using what we know of the industry, what we've done from a diligence perspective of the clients. If we can't ourselves go in and do our own checks in a very robust fashion at scale, we've got the tools and technology and expertise to really do it, frankly, more quickly than someone who just gets a screen in a sandbox environment and is clicking a selection, like 5% selection of records and confirming. We can do some bigger level. Okay, I expected 10,000 rows of data from this table. I see 10,000 rows, or I see 999. Why? We've got that ability. We've taken a much more activist role in data quality ourselves on behalf of the teams who we're doing data migrations for, in CRM specifically, than I would have expected. But I'm glad that we did. It has streamlined the process incredibly when a team doesn't see faults themselves, but we catch them before they've even happened or before they become visible to the team, and we're able to fix those. I think that builds trust.
Yeah, for sure it does. To get to the core of my question, because again, I struggle with this a lot. Is my audio breaking a bit?
No, you're good.
That's good. Okay. So there's testing to spec. So I put together a spec, a mapping doc, whatever. Wonderful. I code that up to the spec. I can now test to spec. And I can put a business analyst on it. I can put a data analyst on it. They can work together and check that everything came over and was transformed right. Perfect. What they can't test for, what I need the end user, the data owner, to test for, is the intent of their data. I have no way of knowing their intent from their data. When they classify a code or a product or a strategy, in your case, let's say, what does that actually mean? I'll give you really stupid example, bi-weekly. Is that twice a week or once every other week? I don't know. So it's that kind of stuff that I really need the user to do. And again, sometimes you just don't have an active participant. And then sometimes like, okay, we'll just fix it post prod. But yeah, so any of that kind of stuff, or any proactive measures you take to deal with it?
Well, I think it speaks to like, why does Cerity Partners have folks in-house who run and manage these conversions, these CRM conversions? Like, why? Is because while a team may not be able to articulate individually or have the time to articulate the intent of a piece of data, we've seen enough systems and enough sets of CRM data over time, and worked with enough teams and done diligence with this team. Again, coming back to putting on that business analyst hat at the very early part of the process, is we can generally look at a CRM in wealth management and understand what a team was trying to do. Not always, sometimes there's something crazy, but I view our role as not just a mover of data between system A and system B, but it's understanding the business that's joining Cerity Partners, so that as we're a custodian with that team of that data coming over, that we do a good job and that team doesn't have a negative experience. So if we see a piece of data that's nonsensical, we'll ask the question. Oftentimes we will have done that upstream from the data conversion to get an understanding of exactly what I see this multi-select pick list that seems to have segments of your business in it. Is that what you're using that for? Okay, fantastic. I'm not actually going to migrate that from that field to like the identical field. We're not going to recreate that. We use a different methodology to do that. Have the conversation, empathetic, they understand what the future state, and a robust amount of training. I find, to your point, if we don't do that, and we just do non-intent based data migration, so just doing it from spec, that they're often wrong. Not wrong technically, but the business breaks.
Right. So like another great example that I've seen a lot, I think with Redtail, specifically Redtail, is the householding model, right? It's horrible in Redtail, and it's critical to your business. So how do you build a household out of contact records, right? Last name, address. I can do my best, but I still need the business, right, to validate.
We're actually to the point where we'll not take the CRM as a source of truth, because for Cerity Partners, our CRM is the source of truth for our client list, right? And that's really, really, really important. But not everyone's been such a steward of their data over time, or maybe they're using something like Redtail where it's a little cockamamie sometimes. We'll correlate the data that we pull out of CRM with other sources, either custodial systems, portfolio reporting, so financial account systems. We'll correlate those together to get a picture of the client base that we'll compare with what we see in the CRM. And if it doesn't compare, we'll actually synthetically create data during the CRM conversion to represent what is the definition of a client on the Cerity Partner side, as opposed to doing a one-to-one conversion. So absolutely, when we encounter that situation, as we don't always trust the originating system, which creates its own validation issues, because how can someone test to spec a migration where we've actually changed data to map to a different model of what a client is?
Because even your accounts don't match anymore.
Don't even,
right?
Yeah, accounts don't match. So we have to be focused on the data lineage when we do something like that, and understand, okay, what is every step that we've done, and trace it back. But it's challenging.
Okay. All right. So this a little more fun question. Give us a horror story. 35 migrations. Must have had one or two horror stories, or call them war stories if you prefer.
The war stories, opportunities for improvement. Every question that we ask during the diligence process is there for a reason. And it's not because we've found that anyone's doing anything wrong. But what I found is that when expectations, the team expects A to happen and B happens, That's when emotions get frayed, people get frustrated, and someone like me needs to hop into a room with someone and be like, okay, what's going on? Let's talk about it. Let's take that step back. I like to avoid those at all costs. That, because of the nature of every one of those questions on that due diligence, every single time we've done a merger, there's always some opportunity for learning. There's always some opportunity where we go in and we find, hey, we could have done this a little better. Where specifically have we seen that horror story, or that I wouldn't call it a horror story. I'd say the biggest time when expectations between A and B, let me give a good example. I touched on it earlier. Walked into an office, and as I'm walking down, I see a couple typewriters in the corner. I'm like, oh man, I love typewriters. I like woodworking. I like old stuff. That's fantastic. And there's no dust on those typewriters. That's interesting. Okay, keep walking down the hall. Okay, we're doing training. We're training people on how do we do agreements. How do we think about clients? And this was fairly early in our process, so there was a little immaturity at the time. And we're launching into this training, and we get asked the question, well, how do you send a client 16 agreements? I'm like, well, there must be a lot of different entities involved, because we do different numbers of agreements for different types of entities, like what's able to contract, all that good stuff. They were like, no. So John Smith has 16 financial accounts. You need to send them 16 agreements. I'm like, account opening paperwork, like at the custodian, that's how accounts are open. There's one piece of paperwork for every financial account. I'm like, no, just the wealth management agreement. I'm like, why would you send them 16 wealth management agreements? Well, one for every financial account. I'm like, why would you do that? I realized at that specific moment we had screwed up. What we had screwed up is we did not know, before we were walking into someone's office, getting ready to go fairly close to live with the CRM conversion, that they had a foundationally different understanding of what a client was than we did. And that no one had realized before that moment that everyone was saying the same words and meaning different things, very different things. And it wasn't a terrible scenario. We had to stop a training session, reorient it, like literally huddle in a back room and be like, okay, we now realize that this is the language that they're using. And now everything makes sense. Like you could literally see the locks clicking in people's heads. And then we came out, we recalibrated. It did require like 3 more training sessions. And then down the road, the way that they were doing that actually permeated into file management systems, into automations that they had rolling between systems. Not knowing that critical piece of data, that language that was different between us, that was deeply impactful. So what do we do after that? We put our business analyst hats back on, and for new mergers, we knew, hey, that's a possibility. Really dig into how do you define a client and use that on a go forward. That's actually when we started synthetically creating parts of the relationship that maybe a team wasn't representing in their CRM, but that as Cerity partners was very important for us. That's one. There's other opportunities for improvement. Maybe I don't want to flag on a podcast. There's it makes us sound really sophisticated and smart, but we've made mistakes. Things happen. We've had to recalibrate, particularly at a tactical level with data conversions. There's been times when teams making changes for an upcoming conversion in a sandbox environment. We have nice color coding, and hey, someone changed the tab that they're on, and all of a sudden they're not in the sandbox environment, and we start seeing alerts going in our little tracker. We're like, oh, why is there an API failure on that field? Nothing's pulled the on. Like, oh god.
It's timely, Stefan. We're going to move on to the reflection period of the show. So I'm curious, had you done mergers before taking this role in your career?
I worked at a wonderful company, Dynasty Financial Partners, before. What their business was, they did breaks. What a break is, it used to be all the financial advisors, lots of them were at Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, like these big banks, right? These big companies. And Dynasty's model at the time, and the industry has since changed, was there were individuals who were working at those companies who wanted to kind of start their own company, to get out of the big banks and really start their own thing. So when I started working for Dynasty, that was my first introduction to that particular business model, which is what they call breakaway advisors, breaking away from a large company and starting their own independent advisory firm. So that's really where I cut my teeth. We did dozens and dozens of those.
Yeah.
I was thrown to the wolves. My first project was doing a link point deployment for 45 different firms. My project after that was to do a box.com implementation for 45 different firms, do a quick integration, form filling technology that's used in wealth management, do that implementation across 45 different firms. So yeah, I cut my teeth there.
Okay.
What does it look like to do a change at an organizational level over and over at scale? Perfect.
So we've got about 5-10 minutes left. So just want to cover a little bit of ground on tips. So I want to ask this question on two fronts. What tips would you give other C-suite executives in your shoes to master merger environments? And the second part of that question is, what tips would you give to like admins, developers that maybe are going through a merger project for the first time?
From an executive level, understanding what is flexible and what's not is deeply important when you're walking into a room with someone who's going through a migration. For us, Salesforce is the ultimate destination. So it's never on the table as an option of, I appreciate you really love your wonderful juncture environment, for example, but the path for us to collaborate and move forward and the expectations that we've set is Salesforce. But understanding where the flexibility in that is. Does a team use something that's foundationally different than your team? Being empathetic and open to those, understanding that it's impossible to do everything at once. If a team is like, yes, we use Salesforce and then built a React app on top of it with a bunch of different gizmos and doodads and what's it's, you're not probably going to be able to promise to bring all those over, but figuring out what are the most important and being empathetic on that. But providing that clarity, not only as an executive in that room to whoever's on the counterpoint, but to that admin who is then assigned to the project. Like that's often a layer where I find there can be misses. The execs are all talking in a room. There's deep agreement on X, Y, and Z. And then it's the admin and one of the client service associates who are actually doing the execution work. And it wasn't that layer of glue between them. Building that during that conversation, making sure that they're in the room, both at that executive level conversation, but also then there's that regular touch point from the admin perspective, get the exec down in the weeds just for a moment and a line of, hey, just confirming this is what we're doing. This is what we're aligned on. I found a lot of additional extra work that's cropped into projects unexpectedly happens from those gaps in communication where the client service associate or the team on the other side will say, well, we desperately need this, but there may have been kind of a discussion or agreement upstream that, that wasn't needed. So you didn't need to do this kind of leap over the fence, so to speak, to make it land it.
Mm-hmm. What about for more admins and developers? Any tips or advice? Obviously, you've hired a lot of people over the years. You've maybe inherited staff that are in a new environment. What would the tip there be? How can they hit the ground running or get comfortable with the uncomfortable?
For Salesforce admins specifically, understanding that the CRM is one part of the platform of any company, and it's not the platform. It is part of an orchestrated set of systems that manage the client lifecycle. If an admin is just looking, this is Salesforce, this is my world, these are the borders, and I don't go beyond them from an understanding perspective, they're doing themselves a deep disservice. Understanding where this platform extends, where's the revenue coming in, how does that data feed work, what are the rules, how does DocuSign, for example, where are the borders of agreements and where are the integrations both in the periphery of the system, and then how does that system then interact with others beyond that border, is an area where I think people can get just a touch myopic, just a touch overly focused. And having that willingness, that interest, that drive to go beyond the borders of Salesforce, I think that's one of the biggest differentiators between admins who are admins today, but some leadership role in the future, versus folks who, you're a 50X certified person who really knows this part of the platform.
That's awesome advice. And it's something that I get asked on a regular basis, right? How can we, as admins, upskill, make themselves the biggest value add to their employer? So, especially in a competitive market space. So thanks for the insight there. A quick question for you, an honest answer, please. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good would you say you guys now are at mergers? 10 being we're the best in the business, 1 being we're terrible.
10. The amount of work and effort and care that we put into, I think, the hardest thing that any company does, which is merging with another company. That is so foundationally challenging and hard, and there's emotions and finances and technology. It's a combination of everything. And being good at that is so foundationally important. I'd say we are 10 on that. There's always opportunity for improvement, but we care at such a foundational level, and we want to make it as perfect as we can.
What would you improve on? Very quickly, what would you improve on? What would you like to do as part of that merger process that you're not doing today, whether it's because of the business, you physically can't, or you've just not had a chance to incorporate it as part of your process?
I would say
to make it 11, we get to 11 out of 10. So what would that be?
To get to 11 out of 10, make our platform do everything for everyone, everywhere. No. As I look at CRM, everyone's done different components, different technology integrations with CRM in the space. So there are situations where we just haven't gotten to a particular feature within our CRM that we really, really want to. But we've been working on this thing over here, maybe an agreements module that we've been deep diving in, making sure that that's got deep integrations elsewhere. And we've not done a deep integration into the insurance side of a financial plan into the CRM. But someone comes along and they're like, well, we have that. I need that. And we're like, it's absolutely on the roadmap. So balancing the additional development and continuing to mature our platform as the wealth management industry continues to mature in a more deeply integrated environment and platform where if you look at a client relationship in wealth management, it's really defined by about 40 different business processes that a team does with their clients, from client meetings to that financial plan to that money movement, making sure that we've got every single one of those clear, well-built, awesome user experience. That's our roadmap, right? Continuing to do that is what will continue to bring us from 10 to 11 of having, as a team comes on, how do you do X? It's over here. How do you do Y? Oh, it's here. And it's great. It's better than any other experience that they can get in the industry. That's the goal.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that there's no comparison to caring, right? That's gonna keep you at your game, because people care about their work ethic, and about producing quality do. And that's kind of just like the bottom line. But regarding giving yourself a 10, just to say, you're operating in a single industry, and you face a unique set of challenges, and I think you got really good at those. But I think if you look at some other industry, they're just much harder to merge orgs. I know because I've seen them. Again, not a knock, just saying. I'll give you an example. B2B SaaS companies where they buy very similar products and a lot of similar company names, and you got to match them up, and there's heavy overlap of data, um, very different sales processes. They might be merging the products into a single product, right? There's a lot of different complexities when it comes to kind of data migrations, and you guys kind of have this, call it a luxury of um, seeing this with uh, um, we don't have multiple wealth managers, so I don't think you have a heavy overlap of data. That's fair, you think?
Yeah,
Okay, anyhow.
yeah, no, I would agree with you. Thank goodness I'm not in steel plate manufacturing. One of the really cool things for me personally has been I used to be based out of New York City, and we've since relocated out to Philadelphia. And one of the things that's given me a deep access to, from an executive perspective, is other CTOs in other industries who are either really out here, a lot of manufacturing and a lot of logistics, and those business models are so different and so interesting. If I had to do a merger of two teams in either B2B SaaS or in some sort of manufacturing where there's an SAP behind the scenes,
Right.
I'd have to learn the playbook over again. There's a lot of fundamentals that I've got, but I absolutely agreed with you. And I'll take luck plus skill, I think, is oftentimes success. You don't have both. You don't have success without a little bit of both.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so looking forward, man, what's next? What's next for Cerity? Salesforce just had Dreamforce, lots of great announcements. They're always pushing AI,
Yeah,
Data
one of
Cloud,
the
Agent Force. So what's next for you? And just putting aside the next merger, any interesting projects coming up, or anything particularly you're excited about?
Well, one of the things that we've done is we have bifurcated the merger teams versus the teams who build that new functionality within the platform. That's been essential for success. Is if I look my other partners in the eye and I say, well, we're not building your thing because we're busy doing this merger work over here, that's not super great. So we're always looking at net new technology. Salesforce, the Foundations product that was announced, this next version of Service Cloud plus Sales Cloud plus Little Data Cloud plus Marketing. I think the getting in the door with Salesforce with net new products that you're not using today is often enormously expensive. And so I look at that announcement, which is almost giving a little sprinkling of a bunch of the tools that marketing accounts engagement, for example, a little sprinkling of that, not enough to really do everything that we need to do at our scale. But pre to now, I didn't have any ability to look at, hey, let me try Data Cloud out in a production environment with our data alongside our data security and all that good stuff. I'm interested in that. The work that Salesforce is doing on flows continues to blow me out of the water. That's fantastic. I used to always look at unofficialsf.com for what are the components that they're getting. And now I believe Salesforce brought that gentleman in some time ago, but he's had a fantastic influence on the development roadmap for flows. It changes the equation sometimes as we're looking, do we need to build an LWC for a particular bit of functionality? Or can I use flows, even if it's for V1, V2, or V3 of that, before we've really gotten the business logic layer down? That's exciting stuff.
Awesome. All righty. I think that's a wrap. So I would like to say a big thank you to Stefan Ludlow for giving us your time today and sharing a lot, right? We covered a lot of ground around mergers and Salesforce and financial service cloud, other kind of wealth management related processes and systems. So really valuable, and it's clear you still got a lot of room to do a lot of cool things in your space. So thank you.
The pleasure was mine, guys. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Looking forward to seeing where you guys continue to take it. It's been awesome listening to the podcast so far, and look forward to being an active listener in the future.
We'll count on that. For our listeners, please do not forget to subscribe to the CRM Success Show for more episodes featuring leaders like Stefan, who are really well and truly shaping the future of CRM. Thank you.